Good morning. This is the 12th day of March, 2014. I'm Dr. Jack Hurlin, a volunteer and docent at the Palm Springs Air Museum in Southern California. Part of our mission is to record and preserve the history of our country's military conflicts, especially World War II. As a part of the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews of veterans and civilians who participated in those conflicts. Today I'm on location at the Covenant Village of Colorado in Westminster, Colorado. And today I have the honor and privilege of interviewing Private Thomas H. Wagner of the United States Army Air Force, of course. Private Wagner in early 1945 enlisted in the flight training program as a cadet in the U.S. Army Air Force Reserve. But when World War II ended in August 1945, the cadets were released from active duty. He then re-enlisted into the active reserve of the Army Air Force until his discharge in 1948. So we're going to talk to him about this and other areas of interest. It's a pleasure and a privilege to have you with me, Private. Thank you, Private Wagner. And we'll be right back with Private Thomas H. Wagner of the U.S. Army Air Force. Well, when you got there, you started basic training.
Yes.
Correct?
8 weeks. 8 weeks of basic training.
8 weeks, 2 months. And that was held again at?
I'm having a Shepherd Field, Texas.
Oh, yeah,
Shepherd
okay.
Field, Texas. Everybody should know Shepherd Field, Texas. It was a real basic training.
Is that right? In the Air Force?
Yeah, in the Air Force.
Can you remember any particular things you did during basic? What you worked with? Type of gun or drilling?
Just a carbon. Mm-hmm. It was the only one that we used. And we, of course, took it apart, put it together, and shot it on the
range.
On the range, rifle range. And we took, in the cadets, we took tests, written tests, 2 or 3 days of written tests. And then it was 2 or 3 days of physical tests. They were real critical with the cadet program on as far as being halfway intelligent and healthy, very healthy.
What was the pay like as a cadet?
$21 a month.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Now, I understand that as junior officers, the cadets were addressed as Mr.
Yes.
all the time. Is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And who was over you? A sergeant?
Yeah. Yeah, the sergeant had charge of about 20 cadets all the way through basic. And of course we had to call him Sarge.
Tell me about the barracks.
Oh, the barracks in Shepherd Field were just wooden buildings, mm-hmm. 1 story, and cots on both sides of the aisle. And we were assigned a cot, and that's where you lived.
Lots of inspections.
Yes. Oh, always. You'd stand they'd call you out in the field. You stand at attention, and you'd be surprised how many people fainted mm-hmm. standing at attention. They didn't know enough to keep flexing their knees. Mm-hmm. So, and then we went out on a 20-mile hike one time. And when we came back, we sat right next to the barracks, and a guy that skipped going on the hike snuck around the corner of the barracks and sat down with us. And our sergeant walked over to him, flipped his helmet off, felt his forehead, and he said, "You didn't go on this hike. You're not sweating." And he wound up in the brig.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Did he ever rejoin the group?
Yeah, he rejoined the group. They forgave him.
Yeah. How was the food?
Oh, I can remember when we had lamb stew. It stunk up the whole base when it was made out of goat, not lamb. So, and I don't eat lamb now at all. So it's kind of dumb on my part, but that's all right.
No, not at all. What did your mother and father think when you went to service?
Well, I think everybody at that time knew that we had to either be drafted or go where you want to go. And if you enlisted, you had at least had a chance to do what you wanted to do most of the time.
Were they concerned about you?
Yeah, but my brother had gone before me, and he was on a Navy destroyer.
Oh.
And the captain of that destroyer did everything he could to get into battle. And my brother one time was telling me the story that he went over the edge of the ship to dump coffee over the edge, and he looked out, and there was a mine floating right by the ship. So he had more problems than I did.
Now, why did you pick the Air Force?
I wanted to fly. I wanted to fly, so.
When did you see your first airplane?
Well, I flew first in a twin engine.
I don't mean in training, I mean before you went in.
Yeah,
Oh,
I traveled a few places before I went in.
I see.
And my first airplane ride was on a twin engine.
DC-3?
Probably, yeah, probably a DC-3.
That was thrilling to you.
Oh, that was terrific. And I could walk through the airport out on the tarmac, up into the airplane, and buy my ticket.
Is that right?
That's right. I didn't have to stand in line
No.
or anything. I could go right out to the plane and buy a ticket. And that doesn't happen anymore.
Certainly does not. So you were bound and determined to fly.
Yes.
And you finished basic training. You got to have the title private rather than Mr.
Right.
And then you were interested in where you were going next, I'm sure.
Yes. Going to go into flight training to be a fighter pilot.
Where did that?
At Lowry Field here
At Lowry.
in
And
Denver.
how many of your group went with you?
Well, all of them passed basic and wound up in Lowry.
Okay.
But when we finished training, there were only 2 of us left out of the 200
You mean flight training?
flight training. 2 of us left out of that group that came from Burlington.
Really?
The rest were wiped out or failed either
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
written tests or part of the physical tests that they gave us at Lowry.
Now, the flight training, did that include ground information first or without flight information?
No, it was a thorough training situation.
So you flew then?
Yeah, they told us what we had to do verbally before they put us in an airplane with a trainer.
I've got a picture here. Let me see if I can get down to it to give some sort of an idea of what it was like for you.
We called them AT6s.
Okay.
You called it a what was it?
That was referred to as a BT-9.
BT-9.
But
It's the
there's
same
the
plane.
aircraft. I'm showing it now.
The same plane as an AT6.
Yeah. Were you sitting in the front or the back? You had an instructor with you?
Yeah, you had an instructor with you most of the way through.
And did he sit behind?
He would sit behind.
Mm-hmm.
And he would let me fly. And then finally I could take off, and finally I could do all the maneuvers that are necessary.
How did you feel when you were?
Oh, I felt great. I remember when I had the psychological test for mental, when I ran out to the building, 6 of the guys were standing down there that they'd just gone through, and I jumped off the top step. Just about broke my legs.
Thrilled. Now, did you get training there besides pilots, navigators or bombardiers and
No,
some of the other things?
I just got pilot.
This was all pilot.
This is all pilot because I wanted to fly.
Did you get your wings?
No, I didn't get my wings. I was wiped out first.
Tell me how that happened. What happened?
Well, the war was over, and they didn't need any pilot replacements to replace the ones that were killed, so they wiped us all out, and we went home.
They discharged you or released you or what?
They released us, and I re-enlisted
Right away?
right away.